Welcome to the Wolf Connection podcast. I'm your host, John Kalfa. Let's talk about some wolves. On this episode of the podcast, we are extremely happy to welcome all the way from Montana via Zoom, Jim Halfpenny, who is a scientist and educator for over 50 years in the field of studying carnivores and tracking and ecology. Jim, welcome from all the way there in Montana. How are you doing?
Doing very well, John, and thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. I first want to start off by thanking you for your service. I was reading up on you the last couple of nights, and I know you're a Vietnam vet in the Navy, so my thanks goes out to you. I come from a military family, so thank you for your service to our country. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for that.
Of course. And we want to dive right in because there's so much to unpack with you. And so you've been doing your work for 50 years. How did you get started on this 5-decade-long work of yours of being a scientist and an educator?
Well, my parents worked very hard, and they babysat me by sending me down the North Platte River, Wyoming into Nebraska. And I got interested in tracks, and Boy Scouts came along, and they encouraged me, and I picked up the books of Ernest Thompson Seton on tracking, and I was hooked.
So when you're tracking, what's the way that you explain to people what a tracker does? Because I was diving into your resume and looking over all the books that you've written. So what does a tracker do? What is their job in the role of the scientific community that you're in?
Well, tracking consists of a batch of techniques, and one has to figure out how to apply the techniques. Some of the main stuff that I end up doing is verification of track identification for situations like animal depredation, finding rare species. I do a lot of environmental impact statement work where they want to know if the rare species are there. And occasionally we might come across a situation where an animal track is involved in some sort of crime situation. So we run a company called Track Scene Investigation. And that's like crime scene investigation on TV. We're the world's largest wildlife forensic tracking organization. And through that, well, our general thing is people take a picture with a cell phone and send it to us and say, who ate my watermelon? But we get a lot more interesting cases than that also. But largely dealing with finding rare species, environmental impact work, and animal depredation.
So we're going to jump right into Yellowstone. So you were there, I believe, in the very beginning when they started the reintroduction process of wolves in Yellowstone. So what was your role in those very beginning years, those early years when those wolves were brought back into the park?
Well, I was here well before the wolves were brought in and advocating for wolf restoration. In 1984, I was teaching any of my classes that I taught. I was advocating that we bring wolves in, and by the late 80s, testifying in hearings about the possibility of bringing them in. When the wolves actually arrived, I've done all sorts of things to support the biologists and managers of the Wolf Project. I think one of my greatest roles has been education and sharing with people who the wolves are, how do you find them, how do you respectfully watch them. For example, each year since the beginning, I've produced a plastic laminated chart that shows who the key wolves are, what packs they're in, what their relationships among the wolves are, their genealogy, in other words. People made it possible for us to bring in wolves. And when they arrived here, people became immensely interested. And as people came, the visitors to Yellowstone, they wanted to be part of wolf restoration. They wanted to know who their wolves were, where the wolves were. And so these charts are the scorecard, if you will. When a person arrives, they want to get the chart, look at the map on it, find the pack, hopefully to see a wolf. And that sharing the wolves has been one of the most key elements of what I've done. I run all sorts of classes on wolves, wolf ecology, but each year the charts have grown more complex and more people want them. Eventually, this led us to developing books on the genealogy of the wolves, the biology of the wolves. And finally, we went to Ancestry.com and put all the wolf background on Ancestry. And now we have apps out. There's an app for that. You can go to Google, Amazon, Apple, and get your app. So that's kind of my encapsulated work with the wolves. I've helped on all sorts of research projects also.
So when like you said, you're developing this chart, this genealogy, this biology of these packs that are coming through, because I saw that you wrote there was a charting wolves book you wrote, I believe in 2012, where obviously the packs have grown and there's more wolves now. You and our mutual colleague of ours, Leo Leckie, and I believe Sharona Barron, I believe is her name, you guys all converged on the 25th anniversary of the reintroduction of wolves in Yellowstone. So take me through what it's like to gather all that information for even that first book you wrote, and really diving into all these different packs and their personalities and really their genealogies. What's the amount of work that goes into that?
Well, the amount of work starts with an individual chart. And back at the height of the wolf population, when wolves came in, the populations went very high quickly. They've dropped down, fluctuating, and they're starting to stabilize out. But at the height of the population, over 250 wolves, and for each wolf, you needed to know its color, its age, its position in the social dominance hierarchy of the pack, whether or not it was collared, what its gender was, history. And so on a single page of the chart, there were 3,000 bits of information just on one side of the chart. And I had to do that every year from 1995 on. It was nice to have others join me in these last few years here. Shauna Barron and Leo Leckie helped out in the last few years as we consolidated the information into large databases. And for the people who are hooked on genealogy, the ancestry of the wolves, who their favorite wolf is, where it came from, who its descendants are, they wanted every single chart. So the book of 2012, we started putting the charts into the book. And we needed to update that for the 25th anniversary. And that's what the 25th anniversary book is. We expanded that by putting a biography of every known wolf in there that we could. And so Leo and Shauna were very instrumental in getting all those biographies written. But in between was the time where we got it onto Ancestry.com. Now, Ancestry is a story in itself. Let me tell you a little bit about Ancestry. People were wanting the books. They wanted the charts. And it occurred to me that this was genealogy, just like human genealogy. Why don't I go to the best genealogy group around that can share the information? Well, that's Ancestry. So I contacted Ancestry, and they were a little dubious. You want to put wolves on Ancestry? But I convinced them of the importance of it. And then we tackled starting to put the information on there. Well, Ancestry, it was not wolf-friendly. It was human-friendly. And Ancestry just didn't understand like having a 2-year-old girl have 7 babies from a 3-year-old boy. And so we'd enter that in and say a big red page come up and say, "You're wrong." And we had to figure out workarounds and putting the information into Ancestry, mind-boggling amount of information. We employed, thanks to a Kickstarter grant, we were able to employ 4 people to work 40 hours a week from the 1st of January to the end of April to get all the back data into Ancestry to make that tree possible. I think that kind of gives you an overview of the quantity of work that's involved here.
Absolutely. I can't fathom, like you were saying, the amount of information, the sheer volume of it, because you would think, 250 wolves doesn't sound like a lot. But as you say, there's multitudes of different data sets, I'm sure, that you all are converging and helping each other on, that you want to give everyone the best outline of these families, of these packs, so that when they go to Ancestry and they go on the app, that they're able to really follow these packs from the beginning from the reintroduction period all the way up through now, 25 years later, right?
Right. And also, I'm curious, Jim, when you say that you convince them of the importance of this installment, what did you say? Can you share with us what you conveyed to them?
Well, to Ancestry, I had to express the quantity of people out there that wanted the information. And everybody across the United States, countries across the world were interested in the genealogy here. Once we convinced Ancestry of that sort of importance and we got the tree done, I was immediately contacted by the killer whale people and the humpback whale people who have genealogies on their own whales, and they wanted to know what we did and would be possible to put the whales in there. Now, I don't know where those projects have gone, but I did have the calls of curiosity to see how to do it. Suddenly, we were taking wildlife biology, wildlife genealogy, and put it into the hands of the public where they could look at it. They could ask their own questions. For example, schools have used the Ancestry thing for simple little questions. What's the ratio of black versus gray wolves? What is the lifespan of a family? Like an individual wolf, there's an average lifespan of a family in the tree. And all sorts of important questions that can be answered. Now, let's put a caveat here. You can do school science on these, but if you've got a real hardcore science project, you need to go to the Wolf office. And let me put a plug in there too. The Wolf office, they've been in charge of collecting, radio collaring the data, handling all the wolves, and they've been very instrumental in us being able to put together the data we've done. And also there's another group. There's a cadre of folks who love wolves. They're out there 365 days a year, from can't see in the morning to can't see at night, watching the wolves. They communicate with a radio network. They tell the biologists when something important is happening, and they have added to our record and knowledge of the wolves immensely. We have the field wolf watchers. We also have the radio collared animals, and we have a background of DNA data. And we put it all together in one bundle to come up with the answer. It's no single direction, and it's no single person. It's a conglomerate of a huge number of people over 25 years that have made this possible.
Now, a lot of these people are working for the Forest Service or the park, or are some people independent, just civilians, just interested in the subject?
Well, Congress, in their wisdom, when they legislated that we could reintroduce wolves, legislated only money to get here, not money for research. And many people have had to step up. The U.S. National Park Service stepped up initially by providing 3 salaries. That's the head of the project, assistant, and a person that does office management and every bit of grunt work that you need out there. And everything else has to come from donations from the public. So when we put out the charts in the book, there's always a section in there that says, if you want to help wolf restoration, send your donations to, and it gives the information on how to donate. The donators have made it possible. For example, there's 2 study periods each year, winter, fall, and winter. For 30 days, try to go out and follow every pack possible and learn everything possible. And the Park Service hires a group of volunteers who work 30 days straight, can't see to can't see, and they earn $7 a day. That's the level of dedication and hope to advance their knowledge as a wildlife biologist, maybe in their careers to get a master's, a doctorate, or get a job. The help of everybody, including the donations, has been critical. Now, mostly we're talking about wolves in Yellowstone National Park. Those that spread outside the park, regretfully, there's not as much money or people there to work on it. So there's less known out there. The real treasure trove of biological, ecological, sociological knowledge occurs in Yellowstone National Park.
And do you feel there's such a correlation, like you said, because it's a conglomerate of different types of people from different types of life, right? It's not just, the federally assisted money that goes to the park services and things like that. Do you feel that when you reach the schools and the students and the people coming to get their doctorates and the volunteers, that this as a collective is where this has really gained steam, and that it's come more into the public eye in a positive way, that everyone can see the work that's going on and how wolves really need to be in the ecological system.
The trail of wolf knowledge to the end user, often students, researchers, and so on, begins with the biologists who have the actual physical work. They got to collar the wolves and work on. The watchers out there, they come from all walks of life. Those watchers, some will come for a week, some will come for a week, 5 times a year, 6 times a year, 7 times a year. Others come for a month. They beg, borrow, or steal literally to be here and work. They've bought homes, they've bought businesses, anything they can do to be here and learn and share about the wolves. A visitor comes into the park, they drive through, and up on the hill, there'll be one of the volunteers with a spotting scope, and they walk up there, and there's nothing more than the pride of that watcher to be able to say, here, look in my scope, and you'll see a wolf. And the smiles and the expressions and the happiness of the people that get to see their first wolf. That's the beginning end. The employees and the watchers who collect that knowledge. Then it goes out to the grade school, high school, university researchers, the people who write the papers, bringing together a group of people whose interest in wolves is beyond belief. We're not talking tens, hundreds, thousands. We're talking in terms of visitors in Yellowstone National Park who've got to see wolves, of hundreds of thousands of people. And they go home with a better idea of conservation and what we've got to do to try to preserve planet Earth. And, if we can find a place for the wolves, live with the wolves in the park, out of the park, perhaps we'll be able to live with planet Earth. And we got a long ways to go to live with planet Earth.
That's true. I have a question, actually, speaking of the differences between inside the park and outside the park. Do you get a lot of data from people tracking outside the park? I know you said there's not as much, financial backing outside the park, but I just wonder if the data that is being collected about the social behavior and their eating habits and what they prey on, et cetera, is similar inside the park to the data that people are finding outside the park, or if the park is creating a sort of bubble habitat where animals behave slightly differently inside the bounds of the park.
There's a very big difference. There's 2 populations of wolves, in park, out of park. Out of the park, each state has to keep track of the number of wolves in packs. And that on their limited budgets is very hard to do. They also have to deal with animal depredation. And at various times, hunting has been authorized outside. So the wolves outside the park are hunted. Inside the park, we have the money, the researchers, the volunteers to make the most intense study of non-hunted wolves that has ever been around. In fact, nowhere on the planet Earth has there been so much known about, photographed of, knowledge of the wolves as there is in Yellowstone National Park. So yes, there's quite a lot of difference between in and out. And one of our big challenges sociologically is to balance off those 2 types of knowledge to make it possible for wolves to survive here in the continental United States into the future.
Yeah. So what are some of if you can share with us, are there some groups or advocates, I know you're one of them, what are some of the steps that you're trying to take so that there can be either more funding to these out-of-park wolves? Leo and I spoke about the Lassen Pack that's here in California that's had 4 years of successful reproduction. Are there any steps that are moving towards more funding to these out-of-park wolves or more volunteers? Is there any sort of outreach happening in those areas? I know there's packs in Minnesota as well.
Within the different areas that have wolves, there are groups of people who love their wolves. And they work in various ways to maintain the security of the wolves, get funding on the wolves, do research. Now, the wolves in the Great Lakes, they survived when we killed off wolves everywhere else in the United States. And there is a large group of researchers there and managers that are pro-wolf working on the wolf. But we have the Mexican wolf. We have wolves getting into Washington, Oregon, California, and possibly we'll have them soon in a population in Colorado. Each of those areas has a support group. Each of the support groups works very hard to gain funding, protect their animals, and share the knowledge within their area. And I'd hate to try to put a number on the quantity of wolf support groups, but there are a lot of them out there. And they vary even from places that take in pet wolves that other people have, they wanted to pet, then they decided they couldn't keep it, so they got to get rid of it. So what do? Well, then you have places that take care of these pet wolves because they can't be returned to the wild. And most of those places also have some sort of form of support for the wild wolves.
What you just said, that last part is part of what happens with Wolf Connection here is there's a lot of wolves or wolf dogs with the crossbreeding that happens with the northern hybrids and the huskies and the malamutes. And it's like you said, they want a wolf as a pet or a wolf, an animal that looks like a wolf as much as possible. They can't take care of that wolf after a short time, really anywhere between 6 months to a year, and then they're put into sanctuary for the rest of their life. So we're one of those, to that last point, that's where we kind of fall into that spectrum where there's people that can't take care of these wolves anymore, and they come to us and they live in sanctuary for the rest of their life. So on the flip end, like you were saying, so what are some of the ways that you try in your own way to explain to people that wolves are one of the most needed, animals out there in terms of a balanced ecological system? Because I know you go and you do a lot of talks and you do a lot of teaching. So what are some of the points you try to drive home in any of the teachings that you do or any of the times you're in there talking to higher officials?
Well, wolves are definitely part of many ecosystems, and they play a role in some sort of balance. We have systems that are balanced without wolves. It's not that you have to have a wolf to balance. Wolves, though in systems, strike a balance with the other animals. And more than just a population numbers type balance, an aesthetic balance. To me, it's as important that we as humans maintain a planet as close as we can to where it was before we got involved and, quite frankly, screwed up a lot of the stuff.
Yeah.
And so the aesthetic balance is just, to me, as important as a balanced population of animals out there. It is our duty, our responsibility. And that takes various avenues. For example, though, there's two sides of it. We can't have wolves in Billings or wolves in Minnesota. And I use those two examples because we've had wolves come in there. And there's a sociological balance. First wolf that bites somebody is going to be international news. Wolf comes into Billings, bites young kid trying to feed it hamburger. Now, whose fault was that? The kid trying to feed it the hamburger or the wolf that didn't know? Well, we know that the poor wolves don't know how to live around people. And it's our job as the pro-wolf community to see that those situations don't develop, because if they do, that is very bad for the whole wolf population. So from that standpoint, we, the pro-wolfers, have to assure control of the quantity and location of where our wolves are. And regretfully, that does involve hunting as one of the better mechanisms of control of the animals. But we have the responsibility to see that the wolves don't get in trouble, therefore raining down trouble on other wolves that are not getting in trouble.
So when you're trying to be out there and manage, or when any of these teams of individuals are trying to manage this species in the most humane way possible, what are some of the nonviolent forms that are being used? I know I've read about the red flag. I think it's called the red flag, where they put up the strings around where there may be livestock, and the red flags waving in the wind will keep them away. What are some of the other ways that are trying to be put into practice more so than going to the extreme and hunting wolves to keep the populations or the numbers around that will keep people comfortable? The non-lethal ways, I should say.
Well, the method you referred to is technically known as fladry. And fladry is pieces of cloth sewn on mile-long pieces of rope. We have folks who sit around all winter and sew these onto the ropes. And then if we've got wolves around a sheep herd, a cow herd, we put those up. And the wolves are not too keen about crossing the fladry. They don't like all that motion. But a wolf is smart. That only works for a bit of time. So we have many other mechanisms. One of my favorites was the rag box, the radio-activated guard box. A couple $100 worth of parts back in the old Radio Shack days, and you had a receiver and a tape recorder and a loudspeaker in this box, and the receiver would pick up the signal of the radio collar of the wolf, and when it did, these weren't very strong receivers, so the wolf had to be pretty close to your herd. And when it picked it up, it would turn on the tape recorder, and the tape recorder would suddenly come off with guns blazing, helicopters diving in, cars honking, brakes squeaking, and the wolves would say, "Uh-oh," and they'd hightail it out of there. Go up on the hillside. Right. That's scary. I don't want to go to any of those animals. But eventually they might say, "That was awful scary, but I didn't get hurt. Maybe I'll try again." And so that works for a while too. But wolves are smart, and they will eventually ignore that. So we have other methods that have been used over time. We have range riders, which we trained every year. They're college kids. We have a training place up here by Yellowstone where we bring them in and train them on how to behave around wolves, and in our country also grizzlies. Because if you've got a carcass of an elk or a cow, you're likely to have grizzlies there. And all night long, they will ride perimeters of the sheep and cattle herds to keep any wolves away from there. We've paid ranchers to allow wolves to live on their land. We've paid ranchers if they will keep their cows in the low pasture. Well, what happens? The cattle deplete the feed, so we have to buy the feed to keep them down there till the wolves have got their pups, and their pups and the wolves move out from the den sites. We pay ranchers that let the wolves live on their land till December 31st of each year, so much money, and then they go on. What we as the pro-wolf community need to do is to be innovative thinkers who are working to make things happen before there is conflict. And that's what these methods do that I'm talking about, is we avoid the conflict as we go forward. And that helps us in a non-lethal manner.
Do you feel like this concept of wolves targeting domestic livestock is a product of domestic livestock just encroaching on wilderness? Is it a product of, wolves being opportunistic hunters, or is it an evolving permanent habit that we're seeing sort of taking place?
Many of your wolves are not wilderness. Most of your wolves are not wilderness, first off. They are spread out in the country across our private lands, our public lands, and much of the depredation that occurs in Montana occurs on people's own private property, not in the wilderness.
No.
And certain ranchers get hit time and again. You got to realize, for that rancher, that sheep herd, that cow herd, that's their life savings. And if a wolf comes in and kills one, no, that's not so bad. But when the wolf comes back again and takes more and again and takes more, it's just a few ranchers, not the whole sheep industry, not the whole cow industry that gets attacked. It's just those certain ranchers time and time again. And we as the pro-wolf community have got to do everything we can to help those ranchers. That includes the methods we've talked about. In many situations, we've been able to pay for livestock. But paying for livestock doesn't handle everything. We could pay for every bit of livestock, but if you're a rancher, when there are wolves around your cattle, you don't sleep day or night. You're worried about it. And if the wolves run your cattle herd for a few hours and run 1 pound of meat off each cow, but don't kill a single cow, and you got a herd of 500, which is not unusual out here, that's 500 pounds of meat times the price of meat per pound that rancher just lost. And we don't compensate for that. Wow. Ranchers have a legitimate argument about what wolves do. And it's not because they're in the wilderness or encroaching on the wilderness. As I said, most predation in Montana occurs on private land. So we, the pro-wolf community, if we want our wolves, we have to be responsible. We have to help the ranchers. Yeah. Let me give you 2 examples. One is the kid that worked down at our local filling station. We only have a town of about 600. He had 3 years of college in. His dad was a hunting outfitter originally, but the hunting went down because the number of elk went down. So he couldn't finish college. There wasn't enough money for him to go to college. We have the ranchers who, on the side, they would guide hunters, and they put a lot of investment into their hunting camps. They got married, the young ones, they got wives, the wives got pregnant. And then when we lost the income because the elk numbers went down, suddenly these people are poor. They're becoming unemployed. And it behooves us as the pro-wolf community to help our neighbors. My neighbors right down the road, I'm for them. I want to help them. We had our state senator. Wolves came in and killed his dogs on the front porch. So we bought him big dogs. Wolves, after about 3 months, come in and killed those. So we bought more dogs. But how do I keep my state senator supporting wolves? And he did when something like that's going. It takes us as the pro-wolf community helping them. Ranchers are an endangered species out here. And when our ranchers disappear, that means development. That means subdividing. That means loss of wild country. Yeah. It's up to us, the pro-wolf community, to save that wild country by saving the endangered species, the rancher.
Amazing.
Yeah. To Stephen's point too, I don't know who we were talking to. I think it was Julia Huffman, somebody before on one of our other episodes. It really is a collective effort that it's such a, the wolf is such a touchy subject. It's celebrated and vilified all in the same breath. And like you say, it's really the coming together that everybody needs to have in order for this species to survive, for the planet to survive, and for all of us as a collective to really get back to that natural setting where we can have, like you were saying before, really before we intervened, and to try and keep the world or at least the countryside as natural as it was, right?
I certainly love to see the country as natural as it was. My life has been built on wild. Everything that's wild, I've done. And I've sold wild all my life. And that comes about by keeping the country natural. But as in Utah, when the last grizzly was killed, as in Colorado, when the last grizzly was killed, yes, Colorado still has mountains, but it's not wild anymore. Yeah. It isn't wild unless there's something there that will kill you and eat you, a grizzly, a wolf. And to me, that brings out the real wildness. That's the aesthetics of why I want wolves, I want bears, and I want to keep the wilderness as wild as possible, but I want to expel that boundary out as far as I can to include all the Forest Service lands, all the BLM lands, and out onto the ranch lands, and keep everything as wild as we can keep it.
So is there a time period in the past that you're referencing for what the landscape should look like? Is it, grizzlies, mountain lions, and wolves all restored to their native range? Is that success?
There's no way we can bring grizzlies and wolves and cougars back to everywhere they once were. We aren't going to have them walking the streets of downtown New York.
Right.
We are in different times now, and we've got to look at what lands we can do this on. For instance, one of our critical projects is called Yukon to Yellowstone, and that's trying to have a corridor from the Yukon Territory, Alaska, clear to Yellowstone that might remain wild, and we would have wild creatures there. There's another side to that question of some people say, oh, we got to put them back everywhere. We can't do that because it's not fair to the animals. It's not fair to put animals in New York City because they're going to get killed. That ain't any restoration animals has to be two criteria: good for the species and fair to the individual. And nowadays, we can't put them everywhere. We can't restore them everywhere and be fair to the individual wolf, the individual grizzly. So we've got to look for the lands where we can be fair, and that's where we work on maintaining it as natural as we can. The question was time period. No, there's no time period. Since humans walked down through the corridor on the ice sheet, we've been changing, altering the environment. The Native Americans altered the environment a lot themselves. They burned areas such as the Great Plains and the forests to make for better hunting. So we as people have been changing it for approximately 12,000 years. So there's no specific time period. We've just got to bring it back to what gives us the best feeling that this is wild.
I mean, I agree. I think Stephen and I are on we agree with that. I mean, I think it's like you said, it's a collective effort, and the work that you've put in for your entire career is just we could talk all day about it. And it's like you mentioned the grizzlies. I know bears in general. I know were your first foray, I think, into wild. A lot of the books that you wrote were about bears and things, bears mostly. What's the main difference that you saw in terms of tracking or going into, dealing with bears, grizzlies in particular, to then wolves? What were some of the main differences you saw when you switched, not really switched, but you sort of migrated over to a different species?
Well, I don't think I would really say I migrated. I'm a carnivore ecologist, and I've been fortunate enough in my career to work with all the carnivores: grizzlies, cougars, wolves, all the big, what we'd call mega charismatic carnivores: wolverine, lynx, fisher, marten, badgers. And I crossed the fields among all the carnivores. My friend Doug Smith, he's a wolf biologist. He's in charge of the Wolf Project. Kerry Gunther's a bear biologist. He's in charge of the bears. I don't isolate myself to a species. I isolate myself to an ecological level, that is the carnivore level. And anything that's a carnivore holds great interest for me. Many, many similarities, although specifics can be different. And I just love the idea that they got 4 big pointed teeth. As I said earlier, wild is where they can kill you and eat you.
I agree with that. Hiking in Montana is a vastly different experience. Not even mountain related, but just you have just a different feeling hiking in Montana, the places where there's still grizzlies and the suite of predators. It's a very different feeling. But I had another question about, maybe it's a personal question, and you don't have to answer it if it is too so. But how do you balance or how do wolf supporters on the ground in the field balance the idea that restoration potentially means that they're going to be open for hunting or for public use in that way?
That's a very difficult one. And back before we brought wolves in, those of us that were pro-wolves figured we're going to make this work. We're going to restore this population. But we knew that if we did, we had to be responsible and control it also. And we knew that we had to have hunting involved. The wolf population, to be responsible about it and fair to the animal too. Remember, it's not fair to have animals going to where they're going to get killed the minute they set foot on the ground. We have to control them. There is the full spectrum of wolf supporters, from the ones that want no animal killed anywhere to those that want every animal, not a hair touched on their bodies. Well, we can't get with either extreme. We've got to have a place in the middle. The number of wolves we have and the locations they can occur is a sociologically determined factor by the people out there, not by us, just the pro-wolf community. And we've got to skate that line of getting them everywhere we can, yet everywhere that'll be sociologically acceptable and also fair to the individual wolf. And that does mean we've got to control them. And hunting is probably our best mechanism of controlling them.
Right. Do you think that's moving forward? That seems to be the way that sort of approach of having a balanced argument about this has to be the way to go. I mean, from everything that we've discussed so far, or we've discussed on this entire podcast, is that there needs to be, like you said, everybody from both sides and in the middle have to work together in order to find something that's going to be, like you said, best for the species, the individual, and everyone around. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
Balance is where we'd like to be, but I know people at both extremes quite well who will never fit into balance. And we've got to bring together the whole group of folks to achieve that balance. And it's not going to happen this year, next year, and 10 years. It's going to take generations of new people, new educated young people, to come together and see the role of the wolf in the ecology of the ecosystem and the necessity for wild. Wild is an endangered species, and it's becoming more and more and more endangered every year as our world population goes up. So the big fight for the next decades, hundreds of years, is going to be, how do we hold a balance for the wild out there?
Do you see any of that changing over the course of your 50 years? Have you seen there be a shift, even if it's slight, to that side of what you're talking about, to that wild side where more education and information and preservation is going towards that side of, hey, we need these species to be here?
Oh, absolutely. It's changed. Since I was a younger lad, our first fights were the Endangered Species Act. We actually had to get 3 rounds of Endangered Species Act to get one. Then our next fight was getting the wolf, getting the grizzly bear listed. And there were indirect things that you didn't consider. For instance, one important factor was we had to get federal tax laws passed so people got an income tax checkoff for donations to nonprofit corporations. We had to come up with, hey, how do we help the rancher who just lost all of his newborn calves to wolf predation? Well, Defenders of Wildlife stepped up, and we created the Bailey Fund so that we could pay the rancher who lost stuff. Along with the Endangered Species Act, then we came up with the Wilderness Act also. This has all happened in my lifetime. And we went from getting those acts through Congress to introducing animals to protecting wildernesses. We still are listing lands as protected. We've enhanced our reach of the national parks, increased national park lands. We've increased national forest lands. But we're fighting more and more of a battle of those that want to develop those lands commercially and so on. Things have changed for the positive, but we're still in the fight. And we got to remember, we got a Wilderness Act, Endangered Species Act, but Congress can change that very easily. And so we still have to fight to maintain what was there and fight to what we're going to have in the future. And that is the battle for the young folks that are coming up right now, is maintain the protection.
Where's the goalpost right now as far as the ESA is concerned about what successful reintroduction is? Like, what's the number? What's the current status?
I suspect you're asking that question specifically about wolves, because each species has a different answer. And with the Endangered Species Act, we said you have to develop a recovery plan that protects ideally the lands and the animals themselves. And with the wolves, we have met our recovery plan. We have got the numbers that we said we needed. We've got them separated into genetic populations, which we said we needed. And the animals are spreading out right now. We have surpassed all the goals we set. Now, there are a lot of folks that are worried that those goals weren't enough and that the changing modern world is changing what our goals should be. But as to the goals we in our wisdom set originally, we've met them. And it is time now. The purpose of the Endangered Species Act is to take an animal that's threatened that it might go extinct, put all the support of the federal government up under it, lift it up until its population is recovered to the point that we can delist the animal to state control. The purpose of the Endangered Species Act is delisting. And the wolves are at the delisting point right now. We need to be turning control over to the states. But having said that, I am of the attitude not of trust, but of don't trust and verify and maintain it the way it should be. So states can manage, but we have to not trust them, verify what's going on, and maintain it the way it should be. So there's still, even though we delist, the role of the people, the public, is critical in seeing how states manage the animals.
Yeah, and that's, I've seen that with a lot of, I know there's been a lot of predation and things that have happened up in Washington State. And I guess that's the gray area that you're talking about, where you get into is you have to reach your goals, get to the point, get to the numbers, as you said, and then it's almost like you said, you have to monitor, you have to let it go and monitor, which I'm sure is tough on any pro-wolf group or pro-wolf people out there, is to find the balance of letting things be as they may, I guess. Am I correct in that?
Well, you say letting things be as they may. I'll say letting things be as they should be,
right? Yeah.
Legally, for the good of the animal, and making sure that happens.
Jim, I can't. This has been it's been a huge pleasure to have you over here, have you over Zoom, and to finally meet you. And thank you for all of your work. And the work that you continue to do. It's fascinating. I implore everybody, if they can, to check out, Jim's got a few websites he gave me that helped me before here: tracknature.com, tracksceneinvestigation.com. And then if you want to check out any of Jim's, there's also halfpenny.me that you can go and check out as well. Jim, are there any other sites or anything you can point anyone to where they can look at more of your work, check out your books, things of that sort?
Or donation opportunities, or volunteer opportunities, et cetera.
Yeah.
That'd be cool.
Let's do two things there. One, I want to let everybody know about the apps that are out on the Wolf Chart.
Yes, please do.
There's Google, Amazon, and Apple. Go to the app stores, search on Yellowstone Wolves 2020. You might have to scroll down, but get your app. You can have it on your own phone. You can be part of wolf restoration. Key element to the apps is $1 immediately off each app purchase will go into the Wolf Project here in Yellowstone. So we really appreciate that. And in the apps, you can also see addresses for how you can make donations of a higher amount. Go to the About page and scroll down in the About page. Donations to the Wolf Project in Yellowstone can be made by going to Yellowstone Forever. And I won't try to give you that whole address here. Just Google Yellowstone Forever and go to the page on wolves, and there you'll find out how you can donate if you'd like to give more than $1 per app.
And then what about the volunteer piece? Is there anywhere, if people want to become wolf watchers or any of those types of positions, is there a way for them to get involved in that way?
There's two levels of volunteers. One is the professional level. Competition there is extremely tough. And you have to apply directly to the Wolf Project, and only a few people are hired each year. If you just want to be a wolf observer, you can come to Yellowstone, start meeting the people. And as you learn a bit, you can start maybe providing valuable pieces of knowledge and join the cadre of people that are out there. We call them watchers. I don't want to go just wolf watchers because we watch bears, we watch all wildlife, we watch safety. But of course, the people watch their wolves. They want to be a wolf watcher. But come and join the group. It takes time to learn enough that you can become a valuable member of that group. But you can certainly start having fun on day one, hour one, and learning.
Awesome. And then what about with Ancestry and in that, if they want to download the app and learn about the genealogy of the wolves as well?
To get onto Ancestry, you have to have an invitation. That's an Ancestry requirement, not ours. Okay. Even if you got an Ancestry account, you have to have the invitation. To get your invitation, go to the website wolfgenes.info. And that's WOLFGENES.info. So genes as in DNA.
Great. And cool. Then obviously the book, the 25th anniversary, Charting Yellowstone Wolves, 25th anniversary, in which you're one of the co-authors there, that's available on Amazon. Any other places where people can pick that up as well?
Well, the book Wolf Charts that Leo and Shauna and I worked on is available at our website, tracknature.com. Tracknature.com. Buy it there, because otherwise Amazon takes a big cut of the profit.
Copy that.
And this is the right app here, Jim? Maybe we'll be able to share it. Does that look like the right
Yes, app? That is the right app you've got there.
All right, I just bought it.
Which app have you got?
Apple. He got it through Apple, yeah. Okay, so yeah, if you guys go to the App Store, if you have Apple, I know we've had a lot of downloads on Apple Podcasts, so just go. It'll be Yellowstone Wolves 2020. The logo will say YNP with a wolf running through it 2020, and it's a white background. You'll see some maps and some other images there, so that'll be it. I believe it was the first one that popped up, Stephen?
Yeah, it's definitely
first one that popped up. So those of you that go on any of your app stores, you'll be able to find it. The one thing, Jim, before I let you go, that I've asked everybody that's come on here with us so far is our final question is, when you hear the word wolf, what are the things that come to mind for you?
Oh, wow. We're talking 35 years of experience with wolves. I started running wolf classes in 1980. And so I guess it's 40 years now. And I was running wolf classes in the Great Lakes states and Canada and chasing wolves. And there's so many experiences that flood through my mind with the animal. And the other thing is the experiences and the people that I've met. Couldn't have met a better group of people. Oh man, I can't give you a simple answer, one experience, etc. It's just everything.
That's fantastic. Jim, again, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much for accepting the invitation and coming on the podcast and sharing your wealth of knowledge. I hope that we can invite you back again at some point and, catch up and see how things are going over there. But again, thank you for all your work. Thank you for everything you've been doing over these last 50 years. It is well appreciated. Thank you so much.
Yeah, amazing to talk to you, sir.
Thank you for having me on, folks.
Howls to all of you out there for listening, and we will be with you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.